The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. The Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Berdinsky. On my right is Ralph Tomaselli, the editor of the Record Journal, and a special guest in the studio tonight, Susan Bysiewicz, the Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Thanks for coming back on the Citizen Mike Show.
It's great to be back here.
That's the right thing to say.
I forgot how elegant it is here.
That's the perfect thing to say. We got a lot of topics to cover, so let's get into it. Let's get into it right away.
Sure.
Your office is Lieutenant Governor. We're used to seeing the gubernatorial candidates on TV, but why does the office of Lieutenant Governor matter?
It matters for three reasons. First, the lieutenant governor under the state constitution presides over the state senate, and our current lieutenant governor has had to cast a deciding vote on 18 occasions on some pretty important issues, because right now the state senate is an 18-18 split, 18 Democrats, 18 Republicans. So the lieutenant governor acts in much the same way that the vice president does in presiding over the United States Senate. The second reason the lieutenant governor is important is that should something happen to the governor under the Constitution, the lieutenant governor steps up. And we know between 1945 and 2004, 6 lieutenant governors have had to step up and serve because someone died, someone resigned, someone was elected to a different office, someone was convicted of corruption, etc. So, basically once a decade, the lieutenant governor has had to step up. So it's an important role in that way. And finally, I think everyone in the state of Connecticut knows we have some very pressing fiscal issues to solve. And so having 2 competent, smart people to help roll up their sleeves and solve some of those difficult issues, I think, is important.
So we're going to get to some more specific issues in a second, but I also wanted to get this out on the top of the show. It's sort of your opening statement and your closing statement, and in a pithy answer. What is the reason why voters in Connecticut should vote for you and Ned? Why you and not the others?
Here's, I think, the most important way to answer that question. Ned and I are the job creation team. Ned's had 30 years of entrepreneurial and very successful private sector business experience. He created a highly successful telecommunications company, and very recently, he's brought a major IT company called Infosys to Hartford. He's not the governor yet. Imagine what he could do if he actually had the power of the governor's office behind him. Infosys has already started interviewing people and has hired several hundred people. They're already creating hundreds of good paying jobs, and that's what we need most in our state. I've spent the past 6 years helping 80 companies across Connecticut get access to capital and create thousands of good paying jobs. And I think the best way to assess what someone will do is to look at what they've done. And Ned and I have a track record of creating good paying jobs. And I would just draw the contrast to the other team led by Mr. Stefanowski. He's been the CFO of UBS and a leader at GE, two companies that have taken thousands of good paying jobs outside our state. So I think there's a real strong difference between our teams.
Changing the subject.
Yep.
Newspaper endorsements.
Yep. We got a lot on our side.
We're gonna talk about two of them specifically. But do they matter? Do newspaper endorsements move the needle?
If you get them, of course they do.
Okay.
No, here's what I would say. Ned and I were proud to get the endorsement of the Merit and Record Journal. Thank you.
And we're going to turn to Ralph in a minute as to the process.
Right. The Hearst newspapers, which are, I think, the biggest chain now in the state, and also the New London Day. The Hartford Courant did not endorse either major party candidate. And so, we feel that having gone to every editorial board and talked in detail about our platform, our ideas, our solutions, that we have a very good vision for our state. Interestingly, the Republican side just decided not to go to most of those. So, I don't know what that says. We think editorial board endorsements are important, and we pursued them vigorously, just as we are pursuing speaking to voters across the state. We've, over the course of our campaign, had dozens of press conferences, usually one or two a day, saying, hey, here's an issue, here's what we'd like to do about it. The other side, not so much.
Ralph, the Record Journal made an endorsement for governor. Before we get into who you endorsed, why you endorsed, I want to give us an idea of the process.
Yeah, we have 5 people that comprise the editorial board.
Okay.
And what we try to do leading up to this kind of election is obviously keep up with the issues. We're discussing the campaign, issues facing the state.
Are you on the?
I am on the board.
Okay,
yes,
go ahead. Yep.
I am on the board.
Yep.
And so we're meeting once a week. We're discussing issues. We are inviting candidates to come in to do interviews with us. We're watching the debates, and then finally we're getting around a table and hashing it out.
So, did Stefanowski, was he invited?
He was.
He was. Did he come?
No.
Did he give you a reply?
Don't believe we got any reply.
Okay. So walk us through why Susan and Ned. Walk us through that.
Well, because Bob Stefanowski didn't even show up.
Well, that's okay.
No, and that's
What is it that Woody Allen always says, half of life is showing up?
No, and certainly though, not responding, you have to take into consideration, because even before that, there were people on the editorial board who wanted specifics on his phase out the income tax plan. I mean, they wanted to sit across from him and ask him questions about how you would phase out the income tax. They had concerns about that. That was a huge factor as we sat around that table. Was, nobody's plan is perfect. None of the 3 candidates' plan is perfect, but certainly, at least Ned Lamont and Susan Byciewicz and Oz Griebel were at least willing to explain their plan.
But I want to know on the merits.
I'm sorry.
What tipped the scale? I mean, you could have, like the Current, gone for Oz. I mean, so what tipped the scale in favor of Ned?
Well, Oz, I don't think his idea of using the rainy day fund completely blew us away either. I had the opportunity as one of the members of the editorial board to sit here and interview Oz Griebel with you. And while I certainly said to you, I thought he did a good job, I thought he gave some specifics, we weren't completely blown away by his plan either. And I'll just add one other thing, because we all come to the editorial board discussion with our own, we hash it out. One of the things I come with is I'm kind of pragmatic. In other words, I think we want to choose a candidate and endorse a candidate that has a chance, at least I do. I want to endorse a candidate that has a chance of winning, and I don't want to endorse a candidate who has no chance of winning, who might take away from somebody who's second on my list. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, enough.
No, it doesn't. Do you follow me on that? You don't have to agree with me with that.
No, I absolutely.
And we're going to turn to the Hartford Courant a little bit.
Yeah, we are. Yeah,
go ahead. Well, I'll wait until we get to that.
So, let's go to the Hartford Courant.
And here's what I'll say about the Hartford Courant, because I find this remarkable. Since I did go to the Ed Board, they interviewed me and my opponent in the primary.
Yep.
And they said they believe, and I think their words were, it's their moral obligation to endorse. And they were very kind. They said that they thought I would make a very fine lieutenant governor, but they chose not to endorse. So I found that kind of remarkable that they would have at the beginning of their editorial, hey, we do this because we think this is important, and then they didn't pick either one of us. So that left me scratching my head.
Gotcha on that. I want to read you some sentences from the Hartford Courant, a piece that endorsed Oz Griebel, and ask you to respond. So, specifically, where do you take issue with what I read? The lead sentence in the editorial says, the state of Connecticut is underwater. Years of complacent Democratic and Republican leadership have done little to right this ship. The Courant recommends a new leader, one not beholden to political parties or to the narrow partisan loyalties that control them. We endorse the independent candidate, Oz Griebel, for governor. I'm going to stop here. I got more passages, but I want to stop here.
So I have a lot of issues, right? I don't have an issue with the first statement that both Republicans and Democrats, both governors and legislators, are responsible for the mess. I don't take issue with that part, but I think to Ralph's point, I don't think that Oz and Monty, and Monty Frank, who's running for lieutenant governor, they are both, very smart, talented people, but I don't think they have a chance of winning. I admire Monty for the work that he has done with respect to trying to reduce gun violence. He has spent a huge amount of time, having lived in Newtown, working on that important issue. And he and I agree on a lot. Oz was a card-carrying Republican, ran as a Republican candidate. Now he's an independent. As looking at it and looking at the work that Oz has done on the Metro Hartford Alliance, look, I know that the Courant knows him, perhaps from his good work in that area, but I'm not sure that he's prepared to be governor, because I think you need a team that has government experience and private sector business experience. I have both government and private sector experience. Ned has private sector business experience, but he's also served on state boards. He worked with the treasurer to invest. He's worked on pension issues. So both of us come with a track record of getting things done, and I certainly have a record of winning, as does Ned.
So a couple more passages, and I want to get your response to those. And we're maybe 3/4 of the way through the article. And the Hartford Courant says, Mr. Lamont, a close second. And it goes on to say, to grow Connecticut's economy, the next governor will have to reassure the business community that the state's costs are under control. That means going back to labor, for more concessions. Mr. Lamont has promised to do that. Here's the problem. It's hard to know if he's sincere, given the vows he made before the primary to stand with labor unions and, quote, to use my veto power if necessary to defeat any legislation that seeks to reduce the strength of collective bargaining. Skipping a little bit, it's hard to know where Mr. Lamont's loyalties really lie. Respond to that.
So I would say this, that Ned and I are very proud to be endorsed by Working Families Party and also to have labor support, both from state employee unions, lots of teachers, lots of police unions, and from labor unions like the building trades that are not connected with the state employee unions. And I believe that Ned is extremely sincere in saying that he will go to the table with the labor unions, and you need someone who's a trusted partner. And I think that the unions trust both Ned and I to do the right thing for the state of Connecticut. And I don't think I don't think Mr. Stefanowski would have the ability to do that, nor do I think that Osgriebel would have the ability to do that, because they just don't have the working relationship with a major stakeholder.
Ralph?
Well, just a comment, which is that I agree that the Current is certainly raising some legitimate points. And I think that the state's agreements with its unions have to continually be looked at. But I also think that Republican candidates and maybe even this editorial kind of drifts into, I don't think union is a dirty word. You know, I know it has become in some circles and in some political rhetoric that union is equal to, you know, people who are being paid more than they deserve, more benefits than they deserve. I just don't follow that.
I don't think that's the Current's point. I think the Current's point is the math doesn't add up.
Right, and I agree with that.
The math does not add up unless you go back to the unions and try to get something.
No doubt.
And I think the Current is saying, will Ned Lamont
and maybe
do that vigorously or just do it as
I want to let Susan jump in.
Yeah, she's ready.
You make a good point, but don't you think union is sometimes used in a way that I don't like? Okay, good.
Okay, so I think that there are other pieces that the Current didn't look at, which is we have got to grow the economy because we are getting to the point where we can't tax anymore, and we are going to make sure that we spend wisely and efficiently. But the discussion has got to be about growth because, you know, if we grow our economy 3% a year, which is a small growth rate, that's enough to pay for our unfunded liabilities. And let's talk about creative solutions, because I'm hearing nothing from the other side. I want to get you back on the point,
though, that's being made. Growth is sort of a long-term-ish, midterm, long-term prospect, somewhat speculative. I think what the Current is getting at, in 4 or 5 months, the governor is going to have to put a budget on the table, and growth isn't going to grab in that period of time, and so they're pressing the candidates. We're all pressing the candidates,
absolutely.
For the short term.
So when we went to the Hartford Courant editorial board, when I went for my primary and when Ned went, we said, look, we get that when we go on day one, should we have the honor of being elected, we are going to have a $2 billion deficit. And we walked them through, and we're happy to talk to anybody who will listen, how we get to that $2 billion without raising taxes. For example, you could reform, and we want to reform Medicaid to keep elderly people in their homes with home care so they don't have to go to nursing homes. That will save $500 million. If we have taxing of sports betting, that's $30 million. If we tax cannabis, which Massachusetts has already gone down that road. That's $75 million. We got to the $2 billion without raising taxes. We get you can't. It takes a while to get growth going, but there are a lot of things that contribute to that, and we have put forward a vision of how we grow, and that goes beyond cutting out 61% of our state's revenue, like income, corporate, and estate taxes. And we have said we want to do property tax relief for seniors and people that make $130,000 or less, and we've said how we're going to pay for it. The other side, totally silent on that, which is maybe why they don't want to go to an editorial board, because they don't know the answer.
It's sort of like taking the Fifth Amendment, not showing up in an editorial board. It's sort of that.
It is. It doesn't help. It doesn't help matters.
Yeah, but I want to get to Stefanowski as soon as you're done with
I want to just make a quick point.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't necessarily assume either that because Ned Lamont has closer ties to unions, that he may not be in a better position to make deals with the unions. Maybe deals that might help the tax. So this notion that because, I mean, can you imagine the unions and Bob Stefanowski? Now, I'm not saying he can't do it, but I don't assume that because has union support that he can't negotiate with the unions.
I agree. I think it goes to the trust factor.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know if he's even going there. But speaking of Stefanowski, we've talked about Stefanowski on this show at least a couple times. And I personally don't have to be rough on him. I just quote Kevin Rennie from the Hartford Courant. I just quote his columns. That's all I have to do.
Right.
You know? So I have a Kevin Rennie. Kevin Rennie is known as a conservative guy. He's a former Republican state senator, former Republican state legislator.
Yeah,
I think he was a senator, I'm not sure. Okay. So, you know, he's no one's fool, and he doesn't suffer fool's
no,
labor.
absolutely not.
Because Stefanowski is sort of part of this discussion, let me just read the latest from the Hartford Courant. Bear with me, okay? Kevin Rennie, October 28th. That's the past Sunday, Hartford Courant. Last fall, so there's a time issue here. At Stefanowski's request, Rennie and Stefanowski met for an interview. The meeting was a revelation. I talked to many candidates, but I do not recall one who knew as little about Connecticut as Stefanowski did that day. Issues that have been debated in the public arena for decades and matter to state residents were new to the Madison Republican. To call him a political ignoramus, it's Rennie, not allegedly, you know, as Colbert would say, allegedly. A political ignoramus would be a kindness. Ouch. I recall a fleeting, alarming thought that what a mess it would be if Stefanowski made it to this year's November 6th general election. Give me another minute. Stefanowski has gotten no better in the months that have followed. I remain baffled that Stefanowski has not used the past year as a full-time candidate to become conversant in the basics of the governor's job and the challenges he would face should the voters make the terrible mistake of electing him. By now, he should be able to explain where he'll find some of those billions he insists can be cut from the state budget. And just quickly, if Susan wants to respond, I'll certainly give her a chance. Going back to the Hartford Courant, there's a section, Why Not Stefanowski? About the middle of that piece, it says, Mr. Stefanowski's harebrained scheme to phase out the income tax is a cynical ploy for votes. It's as if he's running for class president on a platform of more recess. Mr. Stefanowski, by the way, isn't the first Republican to make that laughable income tax elimination claim. Do you want to weigh in on that, or we have other topics that we... Enough said, frankly.
Well,
I mean, I don't want to advise you how to...
So here's what I would say. What I would say is that for the past year or more, for me 2 years, Ned a year, we have been out talking to people about their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations for the state, what their challenges are. So to your point, to Kevin Rennie's point, Mr. Stefanowski doesn't know about the issues. He was asked about crumbling foundations. Ned and I have been in the basements of families who have crumbling foundations and looked at the cracks and talked to them about how, you know, they've purchased a house and they're underwater with their mortgage and they don't know what to do. Yeah. And we've been thinking about and talking to insurance companies, mortgage companies, and we actually have a plan. You know, we will work with our next Attorney General and the Governor and the Attorney General in Massachusetts to say to banks and mortgage companies, we do not need to spend millions on litigation. What we need is a solution. So let's go in a room and let's get one, and let's work with FEMA, because when you have 30,000 families that have issues or potential issues with crumbling foundations, that's a natural disaster in my estimation.
I want to,
that's just one example of an issue that...
And there's many, but it's only an hour show, and we don't have an hour for this segment. So let me pivot completely away from...
Can I just make one? I'm sorry. This is an issue that matters to people in this state. And what I found very frustrating is when our United States Senate was looking at the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh, the question would come to anybody who's running for an office, whether it's General Assembly, whether it's constitutional office, you know, how do you feel about Connecticut's Roe versus Wade statute? And Mr. Stefanowski's reply to that was, I'll take a pass. Yeah. Well, no, you have to appoint people who are judges. Yeah. This is important. It's important to have an opinion, and voters want to know what those opinions are.
Pivoting away from the typical campaign question, at least I hope, are you in favor of open primaries, allowing unaffiliated people to vote in a party primary?
Yes.
They can pick either Democrat or Republican primary to vote in. They can't vote twice, but it would give unaffiliateds a chance to vote in the
Yes, I like open primaries, but people are under the impression, because I think anytime you give people the opportunity to vote, the more people who participate, we get better results. And I have been a person who, as a legislator and as Secretary of the State, fought to open up the primary system. Many people don't realize, though, that it's a matter of party rule in Connecticut, that Democrats and Republicans have chosen to keep our primaries closed.
Well, that's the problem I'm addressing with the question. I haven't, you know, well, actually, I'm in favor of open primaries, but I think the party operatives of the party hierarchy wouldn't like them, and you'd probably see a lot of resistance to it. But as Lieutenant Governor, you know, this may come up. You know, I think there's some people trying to get in the legislature that like that idea. So you like it too.
I do.
How about instant runoff? Instant runoff is a. I'll let you explain it in more detail. But if there's 3 people running for office, no one can say it's a wasted vote to vote for
my first choice, my second choice.
Yeah. Explain that a little bit, and then get your opinion on it.
Right. So candidates or people like John Rowland got elected with less than 50% of the vote because there were multiple candidates running for governor. I'd have to go back and look at the election results, but I think Tom Scott was in that election, and you'd have multiple people, like a Ross Perot type candidate, right? So instant runoff, you'd ask people to rank their choices. Who's your first choice? Who's your second choice? So that hopefully you'd get to over 50% plurality. You'd get 50% plus 1 for a candidate. And I like the idea of having the majority pick a candidate, because, for instance, if Oz continues to stay in the race, maybe one candidate doesn't get 50%. I don't know. We'll have to see how that goes.
Yeah. So you're in favor of instant runoff if everything the details fall into place.
I like the idea.
That's all
It's confusing. I think there have to be a lot of voter education on that, and we'd have to figure out a voting method to address it.
Yeah, absolutely. Changing the subject radically again. On this show, Ralph and I talk a lot about whether President Donald Trump is an issue in the campaign, whether he's sort of a shadow, ghost candidate.
Sure, he's an issue.
I want to raise that with you, but
Absolutely.
I want to phrase the question this way. Is the character of the nation on the ballot so that Republicans would say, oh, absolutely, America for Americans, and Democrats would have a contrasting view, or someone may say, oh, no, Trump has nothing to do with this. What's your view? Is Trump an issue in this campaign?
My view is this, that there has been an assault on all kinds of rights coming out of the White House, the United States Supreme Court, and our United States Congress. And examples of those are women's reproductive freedom, healthcare, environment, consumer issues. The president pledged to overturn Roe, a Supreme Court justice who has been nominated, who is likely to do that. The president wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Ned and I, not only do we support the Roe versus Wade law strongly in our state, we support the Affordable Care Act and its expansion. Our opponents don't. On the Roe versus Wade issue, Mr. Stefanowski took a pass. My opponent has introduced legislation into the General Assembly to cut back on it. Ned and I strongly believe that we should be making energy more sustainably in Connecticut. We should be reducing our carbon footprint, fighting climate change. My opponent has voted against legislation in Connecticut to do that. Mr. Stefanowski doesn't think it's that important. One more, Ned and I strongly support the Sandy Hook legislation that came out around measures to reduce gun violence. Mr. Stefanowski has said publicly he wants to repeal that. Same with my opponent.
He's backed off of that more recently, but he did.
Oh, he said it. He said it, and he got an A rating from the NRA. Yeah. And so this is why I keep saying there's this very stark choice. So yes, another issue is LGBTQ rights. Ned and I strongly support marriage equality and rights for that community. Our opponents have been endorsed by the Family Institute of Connecticut that fought against gay marriage. So there are very stark differences, and Mr. Trump is absolutely on the ballot.
Ralph?
Well, I would add, too, that the Trump template is definitely in play because Bob Stefanowski is following it. And when you read those Kevin Rennie remarks, I'm kind of flashing back to 2016 where a lot of, old media, is that what we are, were saying that Donald Trump was ignoramus, didn't know the issues, didn't care to learn the issues, appeared to have no interest in the issues.
Well, that's why the media is the enemy of the people.
Right.
So
well, no, and not only that, but then I think that's right. And I don't think Bob Stefanowski has gone that far, but what he has done is decided that he's not going to deal with the media. So the template is definitely at work.
Yeah. Susan, staying with a national politics issue and to the extent that it bleeds over into state electoral results, President Trump, as we produce this show, is making a big issue out of immigration. Mm-hmm. And again, as we produce the show, he's in the middle of his expressing his position that he can rewrite the 14th Amendment so that people born in the United States would no longer be citizens, as the 14th Amendment says, if he signs this particular executive order. And he's also making a big deal about the caravan and invasions and the people marching towards the Texas border have diseases and they're criminals. Here's my point. Not whether what he's saying is true or not. We know what his posture is. But I don't sense that Democrats nationally have a coherent message to address what Trump is saying. And so some say Trump is gaining in the polls as he develops this message, and the National Democrats, where are they to be found? I know it's a little off the track from the gubernatorial race, but...
No, immigration is on the ballot right here in Connecticut, and Donald Trump has put it there. And here is an example. When there were children being taken from their children at the Texas border, Chris Murphy, Dick Blumenthal, Ned Lamont, and I stood up and we said, that is wrong. We don't agree with that. And the other side said absolutely nothing. Actually, Ann Hatfield, who's running against William Tong for Attorney General, said she agreed with the president's point of view. So I do believe that immigration is on the ballot. And I agree with what both of you are saying. You are saying, well, you know, Donald Trump doesn't know the issues. Well, there is a part of me that believes that he does know that to a certain element of our citizenry in Connecticut and outside, that people are blaming immigrants for what they perceive as their own problems, and the president is exploiting that. The same thing was happening in the 1920s in our country. And here is why that is important. If we get to a point in our state and our country where we are enabling hate speech and hatred, and we are encouraging discrimination, whether it's against immigrants or women or LGBTQ people or people who don't have the same religion, Jewish people, Muslims, just pick that, then that encourages violent acts. And that's why we have to elevate our public discourse in our state and in our country, because what we say matters. And I do not agree with the way our president has been speaking about huge groups of people, whether it's women or immigrants. Keep going down the list.
Well,
I think I think the Democrats' answer on immigration is probably, well, let's put it this way. No, the answer is the Democrats don't have a good answer to Donald Trump, because almost any answer they give makes them look as though they're in favor of lawlessness. He's kind of backed them into a corner by saying, listen, you know, the rapists are coming, I'm sending the troops, you know, people come from other countries illegally, they have children here, they automatically get citizenship. He has all these sound bites and messages that are very hard to answer in 1 minute or 2 minutes. And almost any answer you give makes you appear to be as though you're in favor of not enforcing immigration laws.
I don't know. One of the disadvantages that Democrats have nationally is that there isn't a single spokesman out there that can grab the attention of CNN or,
right.
CBS or NBC for an extended period of time. However,
the voters have the power to do that, and so and that's why I believe, you know, the national websites 538 are now predicting there's an 86% likelihood that Congress will become Democrat, because I think as Americans are watching, they are saying in many states they don't like what they're seeing in Washington, and they're going to make some changes. And that's how all of us have the power to answer these issues, and it's with our vote and choosing people who share our priorities.
I'm going to give you an example as to what I mean, so I'm going to proselytize again for the 15th time in the show. So Donald Trump says he's sending 5,200 troops to the border. I mean, when I hear that, I said, I don't care. Send 50,000. I mean, it really doesn't matter. They're not shooting anybody. It's against the law.
Right.
You know, they're driving trucks. They're setting
Right.
up tents.
Good
I mean,
point.
send all you want. That's a ploy to.
But most
fool
people don't know that, Mike.
Well, that's why a Democrat
Okay.
nationally has got to step forward
Okay.
and say, and we do, believe in secure borders. And here's the law of the United States, and educate people on the law of the United States as I understand it. This is not my expertise. That people have to be let in temporarily while they're screened for bona fide amnesty claims.
Right.
And I think that's the law of the land. If it is the law of the land, that should be explained. And so if that's true, and Democrats say, we want to follow the law also, but that's off the mainstream Democrat reservation. Susan, you've got the final word on this issue, and then we'll switch. If you want the final word,
Well, I
this
want to
issue.
keep talking about governing Connecticut because I think that's important.
I have your webpage, and you have your issues listed, and you probably got 15 or so. Pick one that we have not talked about yet, and give me the pitch. And we've talked about jobs in the economy and balancing the budget, environment, equal pay, health care.
No, we haven't talked. Well, we haven't talked about equal pay.
You got it. You got the floor on that.
Ned and I strongly believe that women should make dollar for dollar what men make. Sadly, in Connecticut, white women make 83 cents for every dollar that men
How are you going to
make.
fix that? How are you going to deal with that?
And African American women 59 cents and Latino women 48 cents. So one of the big fixes is, and the legislature just did it, stop employers from asking what you made at your last job,
Right.
because that institutionalizes discrimination against women. My opponent was the one person in the state Senate out of 36 that voted against that. It's unimaginable because every family in our state will be uplifted if women could make dollar for dollar what men make. And that is just part of the economic platform that Ned and I have.
Were there any other specifics that you can describe to us as to what you might initiate or Democrats could initiate?
Yeah,
to
so
solve this?
what we would like to do is continue to support small businesses because right now 50%
I mean,
of...
on equal pay, the equal pay issue, is there anything else that can be done?
Yeah, so you have to enforce it. That's really important. I think women also have to learn to be stronger negotiators when they are in salary negotiations. But this step is huge. And I also think that we have to start investing in our state's infrastructure, and that will help our economy. And there is another place where Ned and I have a plan that is tremendously different than the other side. We support the lockbox, which is going to be on the ballot.
As we discussed in the show, we're in favor of it.
Good,
So,
okay.
yeah.
And what we think we should do is toll commercial trucks coming through our state. We think that would raise several $100 million in revenue, which we could then invest in transit-oriented development and public transportation, in fixing our roads and bridges that are number 41 amongst all of our states. And this is an area where every dollar that you spend is $3 or more in economic development. You're seeing it right in Meriden, where housing, retail, all kinds of development is going on right near your beautiful new train station. And it's very exciting that new housing is being built right around the train station. We're seeing this all over the state, but we should be encouraging that more.
Okay.
These are things that we need vibrant cities.
We got time for one last issue. I'm taking it from your website.
Sure.
Healthcare. Everyone's in favor of healthcare. It seems like, that's maybe the Republicans lately have found
Except our
religion on that.
opponents. Except our
So
opponents.
what's the divide?
So the
where
divide
do you stand
is,
and where does he stand?
so Ned and I strongly support the Affordable Health Care Act because as a result of it, 162,000 people in Connecticut now have health insurance that didn't have it before through
But on the
Access
state
Health.
level, on the
Through Access Health Connecticut,
Okay.
which provides, that is the healthcare exchange for Connecticut. There is still more work to be done because there's probably another 150,000 people that are still uninsured. So Ned and I say, keep what we have and expand. The other side would take it away. And this is the remarkable thing. My opponent voted against putting the pre-existing, he voted against putting the Affordable Care Act protections into Connecticut law, including pre-existing conditions. What are pre-existing conditions? Cancer, diabetes, heart disease.
I think we get that. I was something on a little more, I want to pivot away from that, at the risk of interrupting you. I want to talk about healthcare issue, Medicaid, and check me if I went wrong, but I think the legislature in 2017, in an effort to balance the budget, took some people off Medicaid by state law. I want to get into state action by adjusting the eligibility rules for Medicaid, and that is still in play of, I think, and that's a question, adjusting Medicaid eligibility rules to cover more people or less people. You cover more people, cost more money. To balance the budget, there may be pressure to throw some people off that. Do I have the right description of the issue, and where do you stand on that?
So we'd like health care for everybody. And
it's expensive.
Yes, it is. But France, the UK, Germany provide health care for everyone. So saving that, putting that aside, at least keep Access Health Connecticut, because if the Affordable Care Act tomorrow were repealed by Congress, we have the power as a state to say, we'll be like Massachusetts. We'll have health care for people who need it because we can. And this is an issue that no matter where we go in our state, people care about. And this is a huge difference between us and the other side.
Let's make that the final word, except you have the final word for a little closing message if you want, and then we'll sign off because we appreciate you spending the time with us.
Well, I so appreciate the opportunity to have this lively discussion with you, and
she's nice, she's sweet.
Well, no, I appreciate this. It's fun. It goes by way too fast, but the election is coming up on November 6th, and everyone has the opportunity to make their voice heard. So your vote is your voice, and Ned and I would very much appreciate the support, but please get out there and honor all of our relatives and friends who have served in our United States military.
Thanks for coming on the Citizen Mike Show. We appreciate it. We are out of time. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. We produce a show on Wednesdays, but you can see it on WPA TV Thursdays at 9, Friday at 9, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at 9, and soon it's up on YouTube. You can get to that by searching the YouTube Citizen Mike Wallingford channel, or get a hold of me by email or otherwise, and I can send you a link directly to the YouTube clip. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks, Susan Bysiewicz. Good luck on the campaign trail. Good night, everybody.